Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this webinar for TN, the FAFSA 4-month checkup and FAFSA challenge update. I'm joined here today with Suzette Telly, who's our coordinator of statewide services, and also Jason C., who's the senior director of outreach. My name is Sarah Marrero, and I'm the coordinator of college access communications. And we are going to have an exciting day of FAFSA updates. So thank you everybody for being here to join us for this discussion. Obviously, with the FAFSA now 4 months in, we have lots of updates and just best practices that we're going to go over. Jason has some really kind of some FAFSA hacks for us that he's going to help us out with. We have a helpful PDF that's in the chat, so you can click on that and kind of follow along with some roadblocks. But before we get there, Suzette is going to fill us in with some FAFSA challenge updates, some exciting things. So Suzette, take it away.
Thank you very much, Sarah, and thank all of you for spending your Friday morning with us. As Sarah said, if we call it FAFSA Friday here on what we like to think of as a podcast. Let me share my screen real quick. As always, I like to start with College for TN, where we find all good things FAFSA related. While we're here, I did want to point out to you that we've changed the navigation a little bit at the top of College for TN. We've just kind of rearranged things a little bit, but I did want to point out we now have career planning, which has find a career, career assessment, and career clusters pathways. Under college planning, let me move this because I can't see my tabs. Under college planning, we have the college going process, find a college, the step-by-step guide, disability resources, and we've now added adult learners and parent resources. They used to be a separate tab. They are now under college planning. We've changed money for college to financial aid just to make it easier for those who are searching for financial aid information, but all of the tabs remain the same under that. And school resources has pretty much stayed the same. I did want to point out we now have a button for TSAC student portal right there at the top because that's our #1 clicked item on the website. So we thought we should make it a little bit more visible. I also want to encourage you, I'm not going to do it today, but I hope you will take the time to kind of scroll down through here because we've redesigned the homepage. And so we've added some new features and kind of highlighted some things like our lifestyle calculator and a few other things on here. Resources for schools, adult student resources, and a link to our calendar, to name a few. But I do hope that you will, on your own, take the time to go through and look at that. So for today, I'm going to go to school resources and over here to our Path to College events. Of course, we have pages for all 4 of the events, but today and for the last, 118 days, we have been talking about TN FAFSA Frenzy. I did want to point out for you our survey. If you're trying to be a Path to College school, you do have to complete the 4 surveys for your 4 events. You can find those surveys in the same spot on all 4 of the event pages. FAFSA data visualizations is the first place we'll go. So I want to thank Shantae Coleman and Leah Body from our team for creating this visualization. We haven't been able to do the heat map as we've done in the past just because of issues like with stuff not being in FAFSA yet, and a few other things have caused us not to be able to do that. But we do have this beautiful visualization for you, and you can see it's scrollable. Let's pick on Adamsville here. They're right at the top because they're doing a great job. So you can see Adamsville, as you hover over it, you'll see their submission rate is 92.7%, and the lighter blue bar is the completion rate of 78%. Good job, Adamsville. Over here on the right, you'll see the as of date is 4/18, and that changes weekly. It's always about a week behind, so just keep that in mind as you look at the data. And then right now, our state average as of the 18th, 44.7% completion. It's a little bit higher on the submission, up in the 50s, but completion, of course, is the most important at 44.7%. And I think I said before, it is scrollable, but I just wanted to point out, as you scroll down, you can see every public high school in the state and what their percentages are. So let me go back. I did want to remind you of our social media toolkit, especially our 10-day countdown. So if you're looking forward to that May 15th deadline and you want to do some social media posts, we do have 10 days left all the way down to countdown last day. We would encourage you to use those. And also here in our social media guide, you'll find some posts and sample things that you can use to go along with those. Here to my FAFSA Frenzy page. I'm going to go to FAFSA Challenge for just a second, but I wanted to show you the event resources just to remind you that they're there. So we have quite a few resources for high school students, for middle school students, and also for elementary school students. Also on each of these pages, we also have social media and outreach, our logos, and information about volunteer engagement. But right now, let's go back up here to the TN FAFSA Challenge. This is the third year of our FAFSA Challenge and probably the most challenging year that we've had since we've been doing it. There's a lot of unknowns, I'm gonna say right now about the FAFSA Challenge. A lot of it revolves around the deadline and when we think the majority of the FAFSAs have been counted. We know a lot of paper FAFSAs are being used. So I don't want to say that soon after May 15th, we're going to know who our FAFSA champions are. So we will wait until we know that the majority of the FAFSAs have been submitted and completed, and everything has been entered and counted, and then we will name our FAFSA champions. So that may be well into the summer. I'm just gonna tell you. We're also going to do our highest completion and our most improved. We have added a fourth category. I did want to point that out to you. So we are going to recognize very small schools, 1 to 50 seniors, small schools, 51 to 125, medium schools, 126 to 300 seniors, and large schools, more than 300 seniors. FAFSA champions, again, the way to become a FAFSA champion, if you increase your Tennessee Promise applicant FAFSA completion rate by 5 percentage points or more compared to the previous academic year as of the Tennessee Promise FAFSA deadline of May 15th. Or you have 90% or more of your Tennessee Promise applicants complete the FAFSA as of the Tennessee Promise FAFSA deadline. We are thinking of ways that we can honor everybody because it's been a challenging year for everybody working on FAFSAs. So beyond these awards, we are thinking of ways that we can just honor everybody that works in the FAFSA field. So just know that that is coming. So I'm going to stop sharing. And unless are there any questions for me or can we turn it over to Jason?
I think you're good. I just put a link to where we saw the data visualization in the chat, but I think we're good, Suzette.
Thank you very much.
All righty, so Jason C., it's all you. Let's hear what's going on with the FAFSA 4 months in.
Well, Sarah, Suzette, thank you. Good morning, all. I'm going to start here. And I'm going to say thank everyone for your grace and patience over the last, Suzette, Sarah, what did I say perhaps yesterday? If I didn't say it yesterday, at some point, maybe to you two, over the last month, I've had several good things personally happen. And that's occurred. That's unfortunately kind of distracted me a little bit from a work perspective. Also, Sarah, Suzette, my mom's been a little under the weather, and that was a whole thing for a week or so. But thankfully, mom's on the mend. That's a blessing. But to everyone, if I've been more silent over the last month, I'm going to say I apologize. There are some reasons for that, and I am back. What did I say, Sarah, Suzette? I think last Monday I felt was like my first day back from a long, long time. Unfortunately, I am in the hole from an email and text and a voicemail perspective that hopefully on this wonderful Friday I will begin to dig out of. But that being said, again, over the last month, I thank you for patience and grace with me. And with that said, let's begin this update that I have prepared today. PowerPoint. Hopefully it's this one. Share. Sarah, Suzette, full screen. We good?
It's coming. It's starting to share.
Okay.
It's connecting. Yeah. It'll probably just take just a second.
Yeah. Tell me when you see it.
Got it.
Got it.
All right, cool. So this is a FAFSA roadblocks email, and I know my friend Ann, I saw her chat in just a second ago. Ann, you actually heard this in Raleigh when you and I and several others that may be joining this call were in and attending a conference in Raleigh, North Carolina that I did for school counselors across the Southeast. Perhaps I reworked it just a little bit, but we're going to begin here. Actually, some general updates. And speaking about, kind of being off the radar for the last month.
Hey, Jason, I'm so sorry.
Yes.
I'm going to interrupt you for just a second. There's like a little gray box over your PowerPoint. Is there something covering that on your screen?
You are.
Ah,
How about that?
that's worse. Now there's two gray boxes.
Are you
Now
kidding
the
me?
gray box is smaller. That's fine. We can see everything now. There you go. Perfect.
All right, better now?
Yes, that's perfect.
Okay.
Sorry
No,
about that.
it was the little minimized Sarah and Suzette and others. Anyways, general updates. This happened over spring break that I communicated this. We as an agency communicated these things, and guys, being that it was spring break season, and we didn't have I guess Sarah, Suzette, it's been a while since I've done a live webinar that we didn't really talk about these things. I don't think as much since say the end of February. I could be wrong about that. Forgive me. But that being said, let's just make sure we're all on the same page. We've had several questions in the last week specifically, but TSAA, Tennessee Student Assistance Award. Initially, we have set the eligibility cutoff for U.S. citizens at a 3,500 student aid index. All right. That is the initial cutoff for TSAA eligibility. I will say, and guys, behind the scenes, this, as we all know, is a new FAFSA. It's a new need-based calculation. And one thing that our program administrator is going to have to do, and what we're going to have to do as a team, is essentially review eligibility as we hopefully load all of these FAFSA records here in early May, and see where we are from a funding perspective. Because unlike many of our programs, TSCA is the one program that is state appropriated. So in other words, once that money has been awarded, it's gone. Once all of it's awarded, I should say, it is gone. And so with this due calculation, this is the initial set at that 3,500 SAI. We will review eligibility here in the coming months after all these FAFSAs load, and then we'll see where we are. And make a determination on whether or not we need to consider changing the SAI, potentially increasing it, versus potentially awarding on past the priority April 15th deadline. And that's why there is always a priority deadline. It's because of this program. And so that's something just to share, because again, it was an email that the outreach team, and also from an agency perspective, we communicated with our users about that 3,500 SAI student aid index cutoff initially for TSAA eligibility purposes. Secondly, something that's been communicated is a policy change, which for the first time, May 2024 high school graduates can potentially access the Hope Scholarship as early as this summer. For years, those of you that have known me for years and heard me present about the Hope Scholarship, Hope's typically been one of those programs that a May grad could not access until the fall semester, right after graduation. But there has been internally a change that was approved by our TSAC board that now allows May 2024 grads to, again, notice this word I am saying, potentially access the Hope Scholarship this summer. Now, remember, folks, summer from a financial aid terminology, summer is oftentimes considered a trailer term. Marion, hopefully I'm using that lingo correctly, which means this. It's for a student to potentially access that Hope Scholarship this summer, they will need to complete the 23-24 FAFSA. And that deadline for that FAFSA for summer payment purposes has been extended to May 15th, again, for summer 24 payment purposes. If you have any questions, you can shoot those our way, obviously while I'm doing the presentation or after I'm finished with the presentation. So let's dive into the roadblocks. And over the last week, I actually created a 3-page PDF, which Sarah dropped into the chat for those of you that may just be joining. And we're going to be sharing this broadly later with the entire counseling, college access, financial aid administrator community about these FAFSA roadblocks, especially as here in the next couple of weeks, as we approach that May 15th promised deadline. There may be more folks that are potentially volunteering and helping at high schools with FAFSA completion. And for those that have joined this webinar this morning, thank you for volunteering. But one reason we want to do this webinar is to highlight some of these roadblocks, especially for some of our folks that this may be the first time they're assisting a family with this 24-25 FAFSA. And I'm going to begin here. And if you do happen to have the open the PDF, not necessarily going to go line by line, but we're going to kind of start from this account creation perspective. So as a student, as a parent creates their accounts, and I'm beginning with this one. And this one I think was shared. Shout out to some of my private high school colleagues and counselors that shared this little workaround out nationally. But for our parents without Social Security numbers and those that are just now attempting to create their account. So please understand where we are. We are working with a parent who needs to create their account, and specifically one that does not have a Social Security number, and they're creating their account for the first time. This was a workaround, and you're the one that shared this with me, right? You're the one that shared this workaround with me, our colleague Ann from Father Ryan. But that said, what some parents about socials are experiencing when they get to step 3, where they're entering their mailing address and their mobile number, and they click continue, they're getting a pop-up message that says, you need to call us being FAFSA. And there's an option to select whether it's return to login or continue something. Forgive me, as you look at the slide, I don't have that specific pop-up message reflected, but the bottom line is there is a button or a hyperlink within that pop-up message for the parent to click. When they click it, they return to step 1, where they'll see their name and their social. And this is oftentimes when I think Ann maybe even texted me today. So Jason, now the box is grayed out for I don't have a social and da-da-da. Well, here's the trick, as we've learned, is when this parent returns to step 1, click the back button within the browser, as you see me arrow to in the top left-hand corner here. That will then return the parent to step 3, where now they can scroll down, click continue, and the system will allow them to proceed to step 4. Folks, I cannot make this stuff up. But this is a workaround that Ann and I have learned, and again, perhaps sharing maybe the first time broadly in this forum for specifically parents without socials. Amanda, it is the wildest workaround. Yeah, it is. All right. So next, other account issues that honestly, I have probably 25 emails, no joke, that are experiencing something on the screen that I've got to reply to this morning for, to impart, I guess, my wisdom in terms of here's what you should try to do. So, some users, parents and students, are getting an error within step 6 of the account creation process, where all of a sudden the system says your SSN's already in use. I've seen this more so with students than parents. But I will tell you statewide, I have a running list right now of 37 students who have encountered this error in step 6 of the account creation process. Where typically, folks, think about this. Typically, when you go to create your account in step 1, first name, last name, date of birth, social, typically when you click continue, if your social is already in use, you're usually flagged at the beginning in step 1. But for these 37 students, all right, approximately, they're being flagged not until they get to step 6. When they click continue, step 6 is that review your information page. And that's when they're getting the random pop-up says that your SSN's already in use. Please call us for assistance. And again, call us is FAFSA. Well, in working with a handful of these families closely and students closely, some of which have been having this issue since January, they've essentially called every 3 weeks and asked to speak with the help desk and specifically a tier 2 FSCID specialist. And since January, and as the latest update I've received is as of last week. Basically, each week that specialist has said, we are aware of this issue that's impacting some of our students. All right. And quote, we FAFSA currently are working to resolve this issue, but we do not have a resolution at this point in time. And so these parents and students specifically will reach back out and say, all right, Jason, now what? What do I do? And I was like, I think it's time to do paper FAFSA. And so that is a group of students that right now, and also parents, if they're having account creation issues, you'll notice if you review that PDF that we've shared, a lot of my culminating ideas is to submit a paper FAFSA. Second bullet, some of our users, unfortunately, they miss key information. And sometimes that is their social security number. And unfortunately, one issue that we have seen time and time again this cycle is if a user has created their account with the wrong social security number, where generally that person is able to log in to studentaid.gov, click settings, then navigate to personal information, override their social, click save changes, and then that typically in the past has re-triggered the 1 to 3 day Social Security Administration match. That's not working this year, at least in my experience. For most users who have called me with this issue, they're getting an error message that their changes cannot be saved. So yet again, working with, probably in this sense, 3 handfuls of users, I've again encouraged them to call FAFSA, ask to speak with the help desk and a tier 2 FSAID specialist. And folks, let me pause there, because if I do have any new folks joining, you may be thinking, wow, Jason's being very specific on whom to speak with. And yeah, I am, because that is the guidance that we've received from the U.S. Department of Education, that internally, when you call that FAFSA number, 1-800-433-3243, they do have a team of specialists that basically some issues are elevated to. And some of these that I'm highlighting are those that will be elevated to the help desk and a tier 2 specialist. But yet again, this inability to update the SSN within that studentaid.gov account is something that still cannot occur. So what are the workarounds? Well, for that one thing U.S. Department of Education staff has recommended is student or user, could be a parent as well, try creating a new account. Okay? So that's an option. So try it. But think about this, folks. In order to create an account, you got to verify an email address. Most likely that email address is associated with the account that has the wrong social. So if you are in this situation with a user, you then have to say, hey, do you have a secondary or tertiary email that you can access? If not, as I did a week ago at both Cane Ridge and Antioch High Schools here in Nashville, we created quite a few Gmail accounts for these users who were experiencing this. So creating a new account, but this time with the correct social, that is one workaround that is viable. However, there have been errors and issues associated with that, where basically they get to a certain point in that creation process, and yet again, they encounter another error. And at that point in time, folks, again, paper FAFSA time is where I am now going to, and we're going to talk a little bit more about paper FAFSA when we get to, I think, roadblock number 6. But that being said, I mean, some of these issues may not be solvable beyond us having them to complete the paper FAFSA for now until we're told otherwise. Account recovery issues. Now, this is more from a parent perspective that I've seen issues with account recovery. Parents that have, this may be their third student graduating from high school or whatever the scenario may be. Again, sometimes calling FAFSA, that's an arduous task of waiting 45, 60, 120 minutes, may or may not be connected to anyone, blah, 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 blah. Everyone listening here perhaps probably have dealt with these issues with our parents and students. But that being said, just FYI, there is an online method to recover your account. There is a link that actually, if you're looking at the PDF, and actually in the very first page, number 1, that's where we're talking about the account recovery. I'm encouraging my parents specifically to click that link and use that link to potentially have their account recovered. But folks, there are still issues with that, right? Where some of the parents, even after going that route, they haven't heard back anything. It's been months, and so then what? Well, then we'll try to call FAFSA, see if you get a status update, because once you typically open up an online account recovery issue, you are assigned a case number, so you can always try to call FAFSA to get a status update. But yet again, if you're unable to connect with anyone, paper FAFSA might be the option for that family just to get something submitted. And then finally, I know last week I referenced the 2 workshops that I did in person. One thing in helping, quote, new students and parents, meaning students, parents that had not begun the process at all, the one error that I was reminded of is some of our students who were trying to create their studentaid.gov accounts with iCloud.com emails. Folks, per U.S. Department of Education, it's not a FAFSA thing. It's actually an Apple thing, where Apple does not apparently quote unquote, the whole security code thing, at least with the U.S. Department of Education. And oftentimes these students are unable to verify their email accounts, which they have to do in order to move forward. And so yet again, last Tuesday, I believe, I spent a lot of my time at both high schools where we were creating free Gmail accounts for these students to create their accounts with, because the iCloud.com emails were never receiving the verification code. Next, this kind of gets into a little bit of a application completing scenario. And again, note, I'm still talking about from the submission end. I know some of you may be like, Jason, are we going to talk about corrections at all? We might, just a little bit, but frankly, folks, I've done very few corrections because we literally have, I would guess, thousands of Tennesseans who are still unable to submit their FAFSA, right? That being said, roll order. Those of you that attended our boot camps back in the fall, at that point in time, when I did my hour spill, it was like, folks, roll doesn't matter, right? If the student wants to start the FAFSA, invite the parent, awesome. If the parent wants to start the FAFSA, invite the student, awesome, right? Kumbaya, roll order did not matter back in the fall. Well, then this thing launched. And then about 3 weeks into its launch there in January, U.S. Department of Education came out and said, well, maybe roll does matter. there are some issues if a parent starts the FAFSA and then invites the student. So we're recommending that the student begin the FAFSA and invite the parent. Well, fast forward a few months and guess where we are now? We're at the point where in certain scenarios, and perhaps more so with our parents without socials, some who have finally been able to have their identities confirmed, in those scenarios where the student began the FAFSA and the parent that has had their identity confirmed logs in, they may not have an invite. They may not see an invite, even though the student did invite that parent. One of those cases, this is a known glitch, and the U.S. Department of Education has said for our parents without socials and their students, the best path forward will be or is, and I've used this several times, is delete the student application and then have the parent start the application as the parent. So on this screen, let's say Jason, dad, was logging in as dad. I would select parent and I would start the FAFSA as the parent to invite my student to eventually do their portion. And that has been a workaround for our identity confirmed parents without socials who have not previously received an invite from their student. Again, delete the student's application and start from the parent perspective and invite the student. And that has been successful at least several times last week when I used that here in town. This is just a reminder, and this kind of speaks a little bit to corrections right now. I know there was nationally some talk that 40% of FAFSAs submitted. I don't know where we are now, maybe 7 million nationwide, 8 million, who knows. But 40% at one point, the guess was that students answered incorrectly, dependent students specifically incorrectly, indicating yes on the screen, that they wanted to only be considered for an unsub loan versus being able to be considered for all aid, and thus where they then navigate down the parent path. So this is something that for our students from a correction perspective, those that are, quote, lacking parent information and this, that, and the other, and some of the calls and texts and emails that I have been able to respond to, when it's like, all right, Jason, what do we need to do? Oftentimes this is one of those where the student needs to go in, start the correction, navigate to this screen and change their response to no. Once they click continue, that will open up the parent path to eventually invite the parent so that they can do their thing. Speaking of the invite screen, again, errors continue to be experienced on the screen, and a few reminders here. And I've seen this a lot with our students. I want to say, for whatever reason, when they type a name, they oftentimes will add a space at the end of that name. So John space, Smith space, Jackie space, Smith space, right? And in those instances, if that space is added, you will encounter an error message. And so if I'm at the screen as a practitioner helping a family, and there's an error that's received, first, I would check to see, is there space after any of the names listed? All right. If it is, delete the space, re-invite, see what happens. If you still get an error message, I think at that point in time, if the parent already has an account, then it's time to log in as the parent, go to settings, go to personal information, and let's review what the parent has. And I will say over the last couple of weeks when I have been able to be out and about and helping with FAFSAs, and I saw this actually yesterday. I helped a family from Forest School down in Marshall County. They virtually connected with me, and we did just that. And we went to mom's account. Well, mom's account last name was incorrect, or when I say incorrect, it was like an old last name, right? Well, that's why the error message was getting on the invite screen, because the parent's last name on their account was not matching with the last name the parent that the student was putting on the invite screen. So once we updated the last name on the parent's account to reflect what it is now with the Social Security Administration, we went back to the student invite screen. We clicked send invite, and boom, we were able to get past it just like that. All right. Anyways, so those are a couple of things just to talk about the parent's invite screen. Number 5, Amanda, this had been the wildest workaround dating back to early January. And this is one some of you have heard me say before, but I was at Cumberland County High School working with my friends there. I had 3 young men I was working with at the very beginning. And all 3 young men, they got to the citizenship status screen. They selected they were U.S. citizens. They clicked continue, and it wouldn't go anywhere. All right. And so I don't know if this is still an issue, but I'd always like to share it because it was, quote, the first, quote, wild issue that I experienced. And on that day, I was like, let's try something. And so I had the students to click previous, where we returned to the gender, origin, and race questions where they had answered specifically, right? In this case, these were 3, white males. So for giggles, I said, guys, I want you to select prefer not to answer for all 3 questions, right? So for gender, prefer not to answer. For are you of Hispanic origin, prefer not to answer. For what is your student's race, prefer not to answer. And then we return to the citizenship status screen. We select a U.S. citizen. We click continue, and magically we moved on. So again, I've not experienced this issue since January. Perhaps it's been cleared up at this point in time, but just in case, over the next couple of weeks, if you get that, your workaround. And honestly, remember, folks, the race, gender, and Hispanic origin questions are not reported to anyone, any college, any state agency. This is just apparently information the U.S. Department of Education is collecting. Thus, I know my buddy Kevin Edwards just texted, so just thinking about from a district leadership perspective, there's no data related to like gender, race, and stuff that Metro, that TXTSAC, or anyone is going to receive. So, as is for any of those that have watched my line by line, 2.5 minute walkthroughs of each part of this FAFSA, I'm just basically saying, just everyone would answer prefer not to answer to move on. Okay. Number 6, mixed status families. Number 1, identity confirmation process. Let's make sure we all know where we are. And where we are now is if you are working for the first time, again, today, for example, with a parent that does not have a social, and they go, and as a reminder, just in case I have any new folks listening to me, joining us for the first time, remember, anyone touching the FAFSA this year must have a studentaid.gov account, right? Meaning the student and at least one parent. And so Parent Without Social this year has to create a studentaid.gov account just like any other user. Step 1, they'll indicate they don't have a social. They'll go through the 7 steps. At the end of step 7, if they have apparently a credit history, they will be posed 2 to 4 questions from TransUnion, the credit bureau. If they're able to successfully answer those, and when they click continue, for some, they will receive a message of your account's been created and your identity has been verified on the spot, basically from those answers to those TransUnion questions. However, I think the path that we have seen most often is either the parents do not receive the questions, or they potentially, answer the questions incorrectly, and they ultimately get to your account's been created, but you got to contact us, and you got to go through what we've now learned to be known as the identity confirmation process. What's changed since January, February to now is now within moments, this parent should now receive an email from the U.S. Department of Education with their next steps to navigate the identity confirmation process. Kevin, I helped our good friend April Gung at Maplewood last week with several families whose parents were navigating this for the first time. And, April and I, who've worked with one another forever, just like Kevin and Suzette, right? We've all worked together for a long time. And, it's one of those things that we see in high schools. And here's a process that for those of us that do what we do, meaning that we're teachers or we're college access professionals or we're financial aid administrators, like we get the bureaucracy of all this, right? We get it. We understand it. We can follow instructions, right? But in helping this group of parents specifically, April and I just kind of laughed, right? Because, first we looked at the email and you clicked to open the attestation form. Well, then you got to print the attestation form because, most parents and students or high school technology doesn't necessarily allow you to do a fillable PDF like you can on my laptop that I'm speaking into right now, right? So we had to print the attestation form for the parent. Now, the attestation form is pretty straightforward. You only have to complete page 2, which asks for that parent's full name, their mailing address, their email address, the Manver/case number, which it can now finally be found in that same email containing the attestation form. So once you complete that, then the last hurdle is, well, do you have the one form of the acceptable documentation? And the easy acceptable forms of documentation is if this parent has a current passport, right? Or if they by chance have a current driver's license. And to everyone, I'm going to share something. I'm going to get the year wrong, but I learned something actually last week. I had a parent share this with me that apparently in the state of Tennessee, you might have a parent without social that actually, in fact, does have a driver's license. Because prior to a certain year in the mid-aughts, parents without socials were able to obtain driver's license. And until that law changed, apparently parents without socials that did have their driver's license prior to the law change have been grandfathered in, where they're able to continuously renew that driver's license. So interestingly, that I have ran into a few parents that have had a driver's license, and that's an acceptable form of documentation. The point here is, what you got to do next is you got to take a picture of that document. You got to turn that into PDF, which not every professional even knows how to do. And then you got to combine all those pages, right, into one PDF. And then finally, once you, quote, maybe get it saved to your laptop desktop, you got to ask that parent to get into that email, forward it specifically to ID verification at tn.gov, attach the documents. And then what the email shares is in 1 to 3 days, these parents will receive their confirmation. And, I'm sure as some of you are listening to me right now, you either just sighed, you either just rolled your eyes. Some of you may have said a cuss word under your breath. A lot of these parents have still not received confirmation of that process. And so what are their workarounds? Well, I will say my experience at Maplewood last week. We had 2 families that had been awaiting confirmation for several weeks. And April and I, more so April than me, and if April's on, shout out April. April goes, Jason, they're not leaving us until they at least try calling FAFSA. And so they called. It was 2 parents. They were on hold for 65 minutes. They finally got connected to the help desk, and they gave them their Manver case number and asked for a status update. And the parents were apparently able to be finally confirmed because they finally got a hold of someone. Don't know why they hadn't been confirmed before then, but the person on the other line was able to confirm them. Well, on the spot, we refreshed the parent screen, and sure enough, we saw that they were now confirmed and they were able to now help that student with the FAFSA. But bottom line, folks, that's kind of where we are with that identity confirmation process. If the parent has not heard after a week, call FAFSA. And at that point in time, that last resort is paper FAFSA. It is. All right. Now, this is where we'll talk about paper FAFSA. Sarah Suzette, forgive me. You see, I'm chilling right now. It's 10 till 10. I apologize. Just one time check.
We do have a couple of questions for you too, whenever we get close to the end too.
I got you. Well, this may be an example of our FAFSA after dark programming, right? Right, if need be. But that being said, quickly about paper FAFSA. Those of you that probably are also, and maybe some of you have texted, Jason, don't you have concerns about paper FAFSA processing? Of course I do. Of course I do. All right. As of last Friday, let me be clear. As of last Friday, I've not really been able to keep up this week yet, but as of last Friday, per the U.S. Department of Education, there is still no timeline for when FAFSA processing begins from a paper perspective. Okay. So there's that. But as I've said several times to many of you probably listening right now, bless them, but the department always had issues with single page signature pages and getting those processed. I hope that they can process 10 to 13 pages of a paper FAFSA. But again, you heard what I just said, right? They had issues with single paper processing. So this is where I think in our toolkit, as always, some of the last resort things here is the paper FAFSA. But once that paper FAFSA is mailed, as I've continued to work with students, and I get it, folks, we're getting close to the end of school. And that's when communication perhaps may cease with some of our professionals and their students. And I get that, right? But that being said, for those that do stay in contact with me, if I ever hear of a change with any of the online stuff, I'm going to still encourage them to go back and now submit an online application just out of that fear of who knows if the paper FAFSA ever processes. But that's still where my headspace is there. Is if we ever continue to get the thawing of the online system for some of these folks that we need to have them to get that submitted online, again, for fear of these lack of paper FAFSA processing. Last thing on the screen, eligibility concerns for otherwise eligible students. And guys, y'all help me out potentially. I have an italicized statement, I believe, on page 2. Towards the bottom, and I'm going to read it. I wait, this is me, yours truly, I wait official confirmation from the U.S. Department of Education, but it is my understanding that otherwise eligible students in the past, meaning students who are U.S. citizens, if their parents are unable to have their identities confirmed, then these students who in the past have been eligible will now be ineligible for federal and state aid. This is not receiving much attention that I'm aware of beyond certain circles. But it's a concern that those of you who have listened to me, it's a concern I've had since last July. And again, I will reiterate, I await official communication. I have a meeting today at 2:00 virtually with some national leadership. And it's a forum where, unlike this forum where we've got you muted, I'm going to be on camera and I'm going to be able to talk and ask questions. And one of my questions is, for our U.S. citizens who have parents who have to go through this identity confirmation process, what if they don't have a form of acceptable documentation? What does that mean? Does it in fact mean that I've now heard that these students will be ineligible for federal aid, which also means they'd be ineligible for state aid? And folks, I know many of you listening to this work with high school students. I know some of you also work with college students. So just think about the impact this could have with some of our college students who've gotten the Pell Grant for 3 years. They're going into their senior year of college, but mom and dad are unable to have their identities confirmed. That may mean they're no longer eligible for at least any money from FAFSA, which would also mean our state aid programs as well that are connected to FAFSA. Sarah, just because this is one of those, wait, there's more. Guys, there are some corrections issues out there. Yeah, there are apparently some disappearing applications. There you go. One question that's probably been posed, and I think this is the one you posed earlier. Jason, when are we going to have FAFSA reports? And text me afterwards. But that being said, folks, it's been one thing after the other with these FAFSA records, right? They finally got processed by the U.S. Department of Education at the end of March, but then the first week of April, they discovered a calculation issue, a calculation error that basically impacted the majority of those records. Then here, what, week and a half ago, Marion, forgive me if I got the timeline skewed. It's all running together. It's a blur to me right now, but then the records that we received at the state agency level, well, the college order was messed up. So, if Kevin listed, UT Knoxville #1, and Vanderbilt #20 on his FAFSA, if we had loaded Kevin's FAFSA, well, our system would have defaulted to Vanderbilt at #20 because those college codes or order was sent to us in a descending order as opposed to ascending order. And hopefully I've used those terms correctly. But again, we've asked them to reprocess that. So we're awaiting the reprocessing, and the hope is we're finally going to be able to load ICER's, aka FAFSA records, into our system. Again, I've been saying early May for several months now, and as of yesterday, and talking to the IT team, they're still targeting early May, which early May starts next week and the week after, right? That's kind of that. That being said, Suzette, Sarah, right? We have been able to extract some data, some student level data from these unloaded records, and we have begun sharing such reports of non-filers to counselors. And that's something that, again, text me and I'll try to work on yours and Father Ryan's at some point this afternoon, and we'll go from there. I'll end with this. For those that know what this means, right? You know what this means, but folks, we really do need a cheat code for this FAFSA. And Sarah, with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure thing. Okay, so actually a lot of the questions, we had some really great banter in our chat today, but a lot of the questions honestly were answered by other things that you said or are really specific student questions. So for any specific student situation questions, Jason, is it okay if they just reach out to you or maybe their outreach specialist in their area? I'm just assuming that would probably be the most efficient way to get those answers. But just a couple of just general questions real quick for you. One is the summer hope issue. So there's a few questions in the chat about that. So one of the questions was, what about TCAT students who can potentially receive wild or NAFI? Should they do the 23-24 FAFSA or the 25-24-25? I think I said those wrong, but you know what I'm trying to say.
No, Sarah, that's a great question. And that's one of those I actually defer to the TCAT in terms of what they should complete. And if Marion's still on, Marion, you might chime in, but that being said, some of our TCATs are actually, they consider summer a header term, which means only the 24-25 FAFSA needs to be filed. So that being said, if I'm working with a prospective TCAT student that wants to start using NAFI this summer, ask the TCAT. Again, I was working with my buddy Mark over at TCAT Nashville, and I know TCAT Nashville is a header term. So all their students that are looking to enroll this summer, they just have to do the 24-25 FAFSA, but that could vary by TCAT. So I always, just to protect us and to the student, ask the TCAT for clarity.
Yeah. Okay. That sounds like a great option for us. And that's what Marion said too. Yeah. plan to ask the school that they plan to attend. Okay, one more question for you. Somebody wrote in the chat that they thought maybe it would be a problem if the student submits both a paper FAFSA and an online FAFSA. Can you speak to that? Is that
Yeah,
okay?
I can. I mean, guys, so nationally, the problem, and I use quotes, the problem that I know NCAN for one has communicated is, so in theory, folks, how these paper FAFSAs are supposed to work is once you mail them to that PO box in London, Kentucky, what's supposed to happen is Sarah Suzette, I'm gonna pause for a second. Did y'all grow up? Did y'all have a PO box growing up?
No.
All right, so that's a small town thing, perhaps. I always had a PO box, and my granddaddy was a retiree of the U.S. Postal Service, right? So Postal Service is something kind of near and dear. I always found joy of going and checking granddaddy and nanny's and mom and dad's post office boxes every day after school. All right, so just think about this. Let's set the scene here. You're Jason C, working from for the U.S. Department of Education. You're in Kentucky, which I'm from, right? And every day you go to this our PO box from the U.S. Department of Education, you open it up, and you have hundreds of FAFSAs that you now need to open. How it's supposed to work is, as I open those FAFSAs, I'm going to stamp it with a received date. And when that processes, that FAFSA's application date will become the received date that I stamped. So, what NCAN has espoused, rightfully, where it matters, is, if Sarah Marrero mailed her FAFSA February 5th and Jason C took it out of the U.S. Department of Education mailbox on February 9th and stamped it with February 9th, whenever I get around to processing that, I being the U.S. Department of Education, Sarah's FAFSA will reflect a February 9th application date. When it goes to her colleges, when it goes to TEC and TSAC, right? And so for where programs that date matters, right? That's been that narrative of don't do both, right? Don't do both.
Sure.
But I think we're in a spot now where I think for the majority of students at this point that are looking, say, to attend one of our friends who represent TBR schools, right? Where their deadlines basically point to our deadlines from a TEC TSAC perspective as it relates to hope and promise and TSA and blah 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 blah. This is where, if you have a fear of submitting a paper FAFSA and it ever getting processed, but you finally learn that there is an online fix, well, go in, and if the student is able to log in and they don't have anything on their My Activity screen, that means that paper FAFSA has not done anything yet. So maybe it is where if you can submit it online on April the 26th, now, yeah, it will get an April 26th application date rather than a February 9th, but at least it's submitted, right? And potentially completed. I mean, that's kind of where I'm coming from. I think it's a decision, but Sarah Suzette, as you heard me passionately say yesterday, and I'm kind of getting there today, paper FAFSA, for some, it's going to potentially be the answer. Anyways, Suzette, are you going to tease our next week webinar?
Oh, I wasn't planning to. Do you mind doing it?
Yeah. So, guys, and Suzette, call me out. Is it May 10th?
Friday.
It's not next week. It's May 10th. So it's 2 weeks from today.
2 weeks.
Got it. So May 10th, we are going to have our annual TEC TSAC legislative update webinar where we will be joined by our wonderful colleague, Tim Phelps, who will review all of the impactful state aid legislation. Again, that will be Friday, May 10th. Suzette, Sarah, and myself, we will send the registration information out on that later. Suzette, Sarah, will that one be at 10 Central?
Yes.
Yeah. So that will be at 10 Central. we have one maybe last question. Sarah, forgive me. When would the deadline for Hope and TSA be? So, guys, this is maybe a good question because I went over what? What did I go over? I don't know what I went over. Forgive me. Let's go over deadlines right quick. All right. Sarah, chat these if you will.
Sure.
TSCA. The priority deadline was April 15th. Okay. And again, some of you maybe joined late after we had talked about it. We will reassess TSCA in the coming months once we see, has our money been spent, right? But TSCA, its priority deadline was April 15th. Tennessee Promise, as of this moment, it's 10:04. Tennessee Promise deadline is May 15th. Sarah, is that? Before I logged on and I was talking to a colleague, apparently there's some myth that deadline's going to be sometime in September, like a random day. Like, folks, again, y'all know me, you know us. We will share if there are any adjustments needed for deadlines. But as of today, promise is May 15th. And finally, for fall payment purposes, Hope Scholarship is September 1. All right. Hope's always been a September 1 FAFSA deadline for fall payment purposes. I guess the only new one I did add today, and shout out to my adult learners. I don't know if Emily's on the webinar. I doubt Jess or Tina's on, but for our Navigate team, right? September 1's also that reconnect FAFSA deadline as well. The only other deadline I think I did share was for summer Hope purposes, which is new for our graduating seniors this year, which I'll have Tim maybe talk a little bit more about on the May 10th webinar as well. The 23-24 FAFSA deadline for summer payment will be May 15th as well. So again, there's your deadline update as we speak. So
Awesome. Okay, thank you so much, James, for you're not James, you're Jason. I'm sorry. I'm thinking about Tennessee Hope Scholarship or the Tennessee Promise. I'm thinking about all of our meetings and how
Sarah,
James.
you know this. Your sister, James's brother, you know that. It's all good. You can call me whatever.
Right. Thanks, Jason, for all of your help and everybody who joined us today with such great questions. I will drop this PDF here in our chat one more time. We're going to go ahead and wrap up our webinar so that we can get it posted for everybody this Friday. Actually, Suzette, would you mind to put that in the chat real quick while we wrap up that PDF? But yeah, if you guys have any other questions, you're always welcome to reach out to Jason, to the outreach team. You can find your local outreach associate on collegefortn.org. You can find who is your outreach specialist. But thanks everybody for joining us today. And I just want to echo lots of concerns that people have about seniors. I just saw somebody put it in the chat. You know, we're concerned about our seniors. School is about to be over. They're not going to be in our buildings to be able to have easy access to them, to be able to help. So we hear that, and we want to do anything that we can to help support you and your students during this time. So anything you need to reach out to somebody about, please don't hesitate to reach out to an outreach specialist and try and get your questions answered. So we hear you and we see you, and we're with you with all those frustrations that people have about the FAFSAs, and we're also pretty optimistic that somehow this thing is going to get turned around and our students are going to get the aid that they need. So thank you, Suzette and Jason, for joining us today, and thanks everyone online. We're going to go ahead and get this webinar posted, and we hope you all have a great Friday. Thanks, everybody.